Meat and vegetables, what's a big deal? This is a chapter in the Bible, in the New Testament, about the paleo diet, the low carb diet, the carnivore diet. What's going on here? What's a big deal? Remember, again, the context of this whole book of Romans is a deeply divided church that is half Jewish Christian and half Gentile converts to Christianity. And most likely, there were some very sensitive, careful, fastidious Jews who were refraining from eating meat or some sorts of meats when they didn't know the origin and the source of the meat. Well, why? Well, because for the Jews, dietary laws were very important. It was part of their identity. It's what set them apart from everyone else. It's what God called them to do. Their whole lives revolved around clean and unclean, and a big part of that was what you ate and what you didn't eat. It's about purity, no pork, no shellfish, kosher laws. and also in this situation, you might not know where the meat came from. You don't know the butcher. You're eating a lamb, but maybe the butcher touched pork and then touched the lamb. Or maybe the butcher used the same knife to cut the pig and then cut the lamb. And so that's your lamb is contaminated. And you just don't know what you're eating or where it's from or how pure it is. Or maybe the lamb you're eating was actually sacrificed to a pagan god, the god Apollo, at an altar. And then with the leftover meat, it was sent to the butcher after the ceremony. And now it's on your dinner plate. Is it okay to eat that? So some Roman Christians are not eating any meat, just to be sure, probably the ones who were Jewish. And some Christians are eating meat because their conscience is clean. This is causing a great deal of problems. This is dividing of the body. I suspect the dividing line was Jewish Christian versus Gentile Christian, but either way it's causing a stir, a division, and people are now judging one another. Paul is telling the Roman Christians basically, don't judge, keep the peace. Now, there are, in my mind, at least two simple and easy ways to keep the peace in a community, and that is the path of tolerance. One way we achieve peace in the modern world, that's the world we live in, is to have no standards. So if you have zero standards, you'll never judge. And if you never judge and no one ever judges, we will keep the peace. We'll have some kind of unity as long as we have no standards. So imagine, hypothetically, you have a completely undiscriminating palate, the stuff you eat. You can't tell the difference between Taco Bell and El Limon. In your mind, both are equally good or equally whatever. They're just the same. You couldn't tell whether you're eating something from Taco Bell or El Limon. That's because you have no taste, or rather you have bad taste. You're utterly undiscriminating in how you evaluate various things. Now, there really is a difference between Taco Bell and El Limon, but you are so dull in your senses, you can't tell the difference. So you don't judge. Now, that's kind of good. By analogy, if you have no moral, ethical, or faith standards, you'll never judge another Christian because you accept everyone, no matter what they're doing or what they believe or how they're living, no matter what. And if everyone lived that way, then we'd have peace and we'd even have unity. The second way we achieve peace and tolerance in a modern world is to say, you be you. I've got my own way of doing things. You've got your way of doing things. Now I think I'm right. I really, really think I'm right. I have standards and I think you're wrong. I really, really think you're wrong. And so unlike option one, I have standards, and I do have tastes. For example, I think Taco Bell is really, really awful. Because it is. I've got good taste. But on the other hand, if you really like Taco Bell, go ahead. None of my business. As long as I don't have to eat Taco Bell, fine. You eat it all by yourself. And thus, we have peace. We don't judge one another because I literally am separating myself from you. Now, Paul would reject modern option one and modern option two. Paul's actually advocating a third way. To review option one, I have no standards. Whatever. Option two, I have standards, but I just don't care about you. You go do your own thing. Now, this looks like peace and tolerance, but it's actually a rejection of others. This is an ethic of self-centered convenience. Just leave me alone. I don't want to get in your business. Just leave me alone. Thus, we never fight. And it looks like peace and tolerance, and it kind of is. Paul says this is a person you ought to be. This is what he's calling you to do. Okay? Imagine you have immensely high standards, moral, theological, in terms of faith. Furthermore, your love for your brothers and sisters is off the scale. You love them sacrificially. So my actions are driven by love for God, love for community, and love for others. Paul writes to the Romans, make every effort to do what leads to peace and to mutual edification. That's what your goal should be, peace and mutual edification. Is it my goal to be right, or is it my goal to love you and see you flourish? Of course you should be right, but don't be so focused on being right that you crush people around you with how right you are, with absolutely no regard for love. The worst, it's very bad to be so right and be correct and crush people around you with no love for them, like you don't even care about them. I think the way the chapter ends is interesting, where Paul makes a judgment. He says quite clearly, eating meat is okay. It's not a sin. Even if the meat was ceremonially unclean, even if the meat was sacrificed to a pagan god, if your conscience is clean, you can eat the meat. It's okay. But if my eating meat, even though it's okay, is really distressing someone who sees me eat meat, really causing them pain, causing them grief, causing their faith to be really crippled, then Paul says simply, don't eat meat. Just don't eat it. Why? It's okay to eat meat though, but he's saying because you love this other person and your actions, even though they're not sinful, is causing another person pain. So let love and the love of community and the edification of those around you be more important than being right. Be driven by compassion. Now put this in context. Paul's not saying have no standards. He's not saying truth doesn't matter. This is Paul we're talking about. What he's saying is love is a priority. I would imagine the worst community is one driven by neither love nor truth. Okay, just blind tolerance, rooted in nothing. It might appear to be peaceful. It might appear to have no conflict. But that kind of community is incredibly shallow. And that's not a good thing.